Hello, my name is Michael Hayes, or Mike Hayes, and I'm a tax partner at Kingston Smith. The purpose of this session is to consider some of the tax credits available to UK businesses. The UK provides a whole range of attractive tax credits, including credits for R&D expenditure. There will be a separate session on that. But today I want to focus tax credits available for some of the creative sectors, and in particular film, high-end TV, animation and video games. These reliefs are similar in many respects, and they all give an enhanced deduction for tax purposes, which is calculated in a very similar way. I would like to emphasise, though, that the reliefs are not identical, and some of the conditions that apply to one relief are totally different to those that apply to the other reliefs. As I said, there is an enhanced deduction given for production expenditure on one of these areas of creativity, and were that enhanced deduction for tax purposes creates a loss or increases a tax loss, then it is possible to surrender the enhanced deduction or part of it and obtain a tax credit repayment at the rate of 25% of the loss, which is attractive. Later, I will come up with a small example just showing how it works. There are qualifying conditions for each category, such as for films, they have to be intended for theatrical release, in other words, released in a cinema. For high-end TV, they have to be for programs with a program slot of greater than 30 minutes and have to have an average production spend of at least £1 million per hour of program. For video games, they must be intended for supply to the general public. And there are other conditions, but those are just a sort of just an indication of the sort of things that apply. You have to have a production company, so these reliefs are only available to companies, not to partnerships or LPs. And that production company is quite important because it has to be responsible for all the major decisions regarding the production, and it has to negotiate and pay for all the production costs. It is important that there is only one production company per film, TV program and game. So joint productions are not permitted by two production companies, although there is a slight relaxation for international film productions where it is possible to have a joint production arrangement with certain countries. Relief is not available on all the expenditure, and in particular, pre-production expenditure does not necessarily qualify for relief. So normally this is about developing the concept of the TV program, film or game or animation. So for example, if someone has the idea of turning a book into a particular film or TV program or game, then the thought process is of whether that is sustainable, whether it's going to work, how they would do it. All that type of expenditure is pre-production expenditure and is generally not eligible for the tax deduction. So it is important to be able to distinguish between that type of expenditure and the actual expenditure incurred on producing the game, program, film, etc. Rather interestingly, all of these productions, whichever category you're in, have to actually pass a culturally British test. Now, culturally British actually doesn't mean British in the normal sense. It actually includes the whole of the European Economic Area, which, as you're probably aware of, is the European Union plus Iceland, Norway and Liechtenstein. And this is done by way of a point system. So for each type of production, there's a matrix of things that you get points for. And for something like film, there is a maximum of 35 points available. And to qualify for the relief, you have to get at least half of those, which in that case would be 18 out of 35. For video games, there's a maximum of 31 points, and you have to get at least to 16 of those. Your game or other production has to be certified, and it's certified by the British Film Institute. They're the ones that provide the certification which enables you to get the tax relief. Now, if you need to rely on certain sections or certain points from certain sections of the matrix, then you do have to have an accountant's report. Now, if you want more on that, I suggest you look at the British Film Institute's website, which gives a lot of information about the point systems for each different type of production, and is worth spending some time looking at that. You need to, before you can make a claim, you need to be able to identify the total core expenditure, that means worldwide expenditure, and separately the amount of that expenditure which is UK expenditure. And the reason for that is that your enhanced or additional tax deduction is equal to the lower of 80% of your worldwide production spend or the total of the UK spend. Okay, so let's take an example where we produce a particular, let's say it's a TV program, or let's say it's an animation, and we actually spend £1 million on this thing worldwide, but £700,000 of that money is actually spent in the UK, so it's UK expenditure. The amount that you get an enhancement on is the lower of the 700,000 or 80% of the total 1 million. So clearly that's 800,000. So the enhancement is on the £700,000. So what actually happens is you get an additional tax deduction equal to 100% of the £700,000. And that comes off your profits for corporate tax purposes. Now, if that creates or increases a loss, then if we're talking about creating a loss, then it's the amount of that enhancement that turns the profit into a loss. You can surrender that and get a 25% tax repayable credit. If we are increasing a loss by £700,000, you can surrender that £700,000 in full and get a repayable credit of 25%, which is clearly very generous. There are other issues to consider. These reliefs are complicated. You do need to consider interaction with R&D. In particular, if you're doing work on something like a video game, you're perhaps involved in enhancements in technology. That expenditure may also qualify for R&D tax credits. Unfortunately, you can't claim both the video games tax credit and R&D tax credits on the same pound of expenditure. But you may find that you've got expenditure that doesn't qualify for the creative sector credit, but does for the R&D and vice versa. So that's quite important. Then there's the issue of structuring your production. As I said before, you need to have a production company, but you also perhaps need to consider which company takes the income from the thing that you have actually created, who's responsible for management, and so on, where the intellectual property rights are held, and matters relating to that. So there is some structure planning for any organisation looking to actually set up and undertake one of these creative sector productions. And finally, it's really important, particularly where you have multiple parties involved, to ensure that this is fully documented and you have contracts between the parties. As I said before, it is important that the production company undertakes certain things. So clearly having some evidence of what its responsibilities are and its role is in the overall production is quite important in case HMRC ever ask for that. So that is about all I have to say for this webinar, or this session, should I say. It's not really a webinar. If you would like any further information, then please look at our website. We have information about these creative sector reliefs there, or please email us and ask, and we'll be happy to provide you with further information. So that's all. Thank you for listening in. Goodbye.